Next would be I'm not going to try to say that username. Concern on the FLEXX installation and troubleshooting video concerning setting eco mode. Does this set a 3 ton to 2.5? Does this mean we set CFM for 2.5 also? Thanks. All right, so I think this was in reference to if you did determine that you needed a 1/2 ton size, could you use eco mode to at least give you an opportunity to run a little bit longer? Uh,
Yes.
okay, so
And
yep,
I
you
and
guys
I
already
think
said
I think you could set it for 2.5 tons worth of airflow because it's going to be running economy mode on the outdoor unit. But I think even if you kept it at the 3 ton of operation as far as airflow, I still don't think you're talking about a minimal difference
Yeah.
in operation.
Yeah. And it actually gives instructions in the service manual or installation manual about how to set those and use the eco mode and the strong mode to give that little difference of 1/2 ton.
Remember, the other thing too that I always remind everybody too is, you know, these things are do an exceptional job of protecting themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So if we do set it for 2.5 ton and we had high static against it, it's the worst that's going to happen is you're going to have an air code pop up and with something to address. It's not going to, I don't, it's not going to damage the machine. So,
yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, we aren't relying on like a low pressure switch, for example. Now, there are many units out there that don't have a low pressure switch at all. And the unit will absolutely run with nothing in it until that overload trips and keeps tripping and keeps tripping. And that's actually another thing that I don't think we talk about enough is the fact that our overloads are external. So you trip an overload enough, eventually they want to give up. Well, yeah, sure, you're replacing the overload on top of the compressor, but you don't have a bad compressor now because of it.
Right.
You're switching an overload. I remember out there, like, with a garden hose trying to get that compressor to cool off, and beating on it with a hammer to see if I can get that overload to go back in, so that I could put refrigerant back in it. Or maybe it's because the coil was dirty or the filters were, they change them every month, right? You always check the trash can and you can see that filter they changed, right? Every month, right? Before you get called out.
so maybe it don't have an overload at all,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the FLEXX. The FLEXX doesn't have an overload. The
Right.
inverter board is the overload.
Right. So in that case, we're talking about, we're not relying on something that's internal to the compressor.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
What you'll notice when you open up one of these units, depending, no matter which one that you choose, even the ones that go in ultra heat, you got the solenoids and the EVs and all the rest of that. You're talking about something external to the compressor. There are compressor manufacturers out there that have come up with all kinds of different ways to try to do a regular compressor, but speed it up, slow it down, or reduce the amount of refrigerant flow that it's sending into the system, that kind of thing. And unfortunately, a lot of those things are internal to that compressor. They put that in a hermetically sealed crankcase, and there's nothing you can do to fix that. Once that component goes out, so they're adding additional components that you can't do anything with.
Right. So if it fails, your compressor's failed.
Yeah, if one of those little things fails, it's done. Whether that's a 2-speed compressor or like some kind of weird inverter hybrid type of compressor that I've recently seen. They're adding more components, moving components, operating components within a hermetically sealed chamber. I'd rather replace the board than have to swap out a whole compressor every single time. That also makes compressors a lot more expensive too, right?
Well, especially if you want to take it one step further and compare it to a 2-stage compressor. Top of that scroll plate's got to turn. I can't think of the name of it on the top of my head, but
yeah,
it's another mechanical part that could fail.
Right.
In a scroll compressor.
Right.
When what we're doing with scroll compressor or rotary compressor with inverter driven units, we're simply just slowing it down or speeding it up.
Right.
So your mechanical failure rate in there's less because you don't have other mechanical devices in there that have to, give you your first and second stage. You don't have to worry about that plates turning.
What's the first thing to go in your car? Transmission.
Right. Because of all the clutches and everything else.
So if you don't have a transmission in your hermetically sealed compressor.
Right.
Right. What's kind of insane to me, at least, if I'm going to nerd out for a minute, is if you've got something that is effectively just a solenoid, that could leave the compressor go through a solenoid, and then come back into the compressor. Because I mean, that's effectively what we've got, with
Yeah.
our ultra heat or our hot gas bypass, or many of the other features that we got in the product. It's a simple solenoid, or just a
It's a
simple
simple
electronic expansion.
solenoid that we have a very low failure rate on.
Right.
Same with the EEVs. We don't have a high failure rate. Those EEVs, our pressure switches, everything in these machines, being all side discharge, are housed up inside the unit. So your pressure switches are not getting weather treated, and hammered on by the weather.
And transducers
EEVs are not
aren't out
getting
in the weather.
hammered. The pressure transducers aren't out in the weather. Everything's enclosed. Whether it's an
But
EEV on an indoor or an outdoor,
accessible.
it's still accessible, but not weather beaten. So,
Mhm.
and I've seen my fair share of EV failures on units where the EV is not, it is exposed to the weather
Right.
and typically has failures, and it's usually failures because of moisture infiltration. And it's moisture infiltration from the elements, not from the machine design.
Right.
Right.
So the dependability is there.